people. Welcome back to another episode of Navvai Shift, where we speak with leaders shaping the future of finance, technology, and growth. So today I'm joined by Rory Yates, a strategy leader at EIS, the insurance platform working with major carriers globally to help them transform from policy-centric to customer-centric. Rory, how you doing?
I'm good, thanks. How are you guys?
Very well, very well. Pleasure to have you on board today.
Healthy, can't complain.
Yeah, exactly.
So Rory, let's start with your background. How did this journey kind of lead you to what you're doing today at EIS?
So that's a really interesting one. And we're in insurance, but I have a slightly love-hate relationship with insurance. So I come in and out of this industry along this journey. I started out early on in value-based management roles and realized that the internet, you guys are too young for this, but this was pre-internet becoming mainstream, but realized it was the future. We jumped across to what was called Abbey National at the time, but then became Santander while I was there, and tried to launch a series of digital firsts, internet banks, Kahoot, all sorts of businesses. James Hay, there was a number of their businesses that were digitizing and trying to pioneer at that time. And of course, we had no other reference for it. When people say, "Oh, you launched an internet bank," there were no other internet banks at the time. So we were in the world live with that proposition. So we were making it up. I was in my early 20s, but it gave me a huge opportunity to just kind of realize that applying your imagination, a lot of energy, and not having this incumbent view of an industry kind of kill your spirit, right? So really, I just would question everything, ask, hang on, why are we doing it that way? And also, probably like you guys, had multi-skills because I'd adopted things earlier on than my cohorts at the time. I knew how to code a bit. I knew I understood tech a bit. I cared a lot about customers. That's always been my major focus. And so then that's the kickoff of me then going through looks like the most random career on the planet. I've been in capital investors. I've done turnarounds. I've done bits of my own businesses and sold them off. Digital agencies. The one characteristic that's true throughout all of that is I lean into this idea that to be more digital or to be more anything, you have to be more human. So I've invested a lot in anthropology, psychology, neurology, constantly just trying to ask, well, what's the human in the loop here need, and how do we better their experience of the world, basically. So then that took me in and out of insurance with that same mindset. I did a lot of the first quote and buy systems for insurers back in the day, a lot of the first kind of login environments. These were all new, right, at the time. And then that sort of morphed into how do we really relay the foundations of insurers and make as you said earlier, move them from being these policy-centric businesses that write risk businesses that can value customers. And that took me into EIS, where I am today.
Nice. Oh, Rory, did you have an athletics career?
I did have you could describe it as a failed athletics career. I had a career-ending industry in basketball. I played for Great Britain a bunch of times. I was a junior national player in the UK, and then had a stint in the States at D2 basketball, so not D1. Work for an American company, and a lot of American colleagues always assume it's D1. I was like, I wish, because that would have been, the NBA. End up back in Europe, university in Southampton. Got an injury playing in Greece. I was paid to play, so I was professional. And what a place to play, right? I mean, no worries there. But sport also, Josh, got me out of, I come from relative poverty. I say relative because I had a loving family and a brilliant childhood, but we didn't have any money. And my prospect of going to university or looking beyond without sport, without coaches that, made you feel great and put you in community. So I passionately believe in the power of sport. So in and out of that insurance career that I described, actually, really importantly, I go back to sports transformations. So at Cognizant, I led the transformation of the Football Association with a guy called Russell James, who is just an exceptional sort of visionary in sport and still operates around lots of sports. I've done the Lions tour. I turned that around in 2013 and digitized the tour. I've done all sorts of stuff where I believe that we get to the grassroots and we inspire young people to find communities, find the things I found in my lifetime. So yes, but that background, although it's a slightly failed basketball career because of this injury, I'm not saying I would have been a big deal, but I was doing okay.
Yeah.
It got me where I needed to get to. And
I was saying,
very grateful.
You often find that people that are in athletics or any kind of sport, they do have like a killer mindset. So I wanted to just ask, what kind of like transferable skills did that have leading you into your change of career path?
And I'm really grateful for it as well, because not everybody understands to ask that question. I think whilst there's a lot of competitive stuff that I could go to and that kind of performance mentality and working on yourself, there's people forget in sports, team sport, but you work on yourself. Basketball in particular, actually, it's like a group of individuals rather than, and so everyone's working on themselves, but then for the team. I think what I actually think about the most is to go through a sports journey in a relatively young age, right? Junior national basketball, going around the country playing for England or Great Britain, sorry. You're under 19, so you're quite young. I mean, I look at other things I was doing back then and think, crikey, you knew nothing about the world. But what you got to was, why not me? Right? I took a lot of that into business. Why couldn't I change this? Why not me? I'm not saying I'm better than anybody else. I don't need to be. I need to be good enough, and then we get on with it. And that attitude is absolutely fundamental to anything I've done.
Man, that's amazing. I much appreciate for the insight, Rory. So as you kind of mentioned this previously, you've led major sports transformations. So what do those projects teach you about culture, data, and decision making?
But first of all of those things collide. You want to make them collide in a beautiful, beautiful way. It's this idea of kind of being world made. You can kind of bring all of these brilliant points of view across. I mean, I'll give you a perspective on that. When we were working on the FA, we had a permanent box in Wembley, a lot of people on the ground there. If people joined the team, I would take them to a window in the Football Association and I would point to some tenement buildings, essentially some high rises in the distance. And I would just explain to them if they didn't understand that whilst they're working on this digital data transformation project, if they didn't understand that, it's as simple as if we can get a girl to play football from one of those buildings, that actually will get them to sport, but that will get them to friendships, we'll bring that community together, that actually they should leave the project. And very surprisingly, sometimes some people will be like, no, I don't get that at all. I'll be like, well, you're not the person, right? You might think you're coding something. You're actually coding that into the world. And like that sort of cultural shift was always has always been at the forefront of my mind. And everything we did with them was Anthropology led. So we would go and work out what those social barriers are. One of the successful ways of getting girls to football was to build a carpooling app. Meant that parents who've double income, often with night shifts and all sorts of stuff going on in their lives, didn't want their daughter to go alone to a football game. And the data also could tell the girl that there were lots of other girls attending, because that was a big criteria for the girls. So you find out Anthropology finds all this out, and then you go build a safe digital solution for that. And that's the stuff that shifts the dial. And it's exactly that collision of the three things that you just described there that I think, we lose in a lot of other businesses, right? In sport, I think if you've got a few people, and it wasn't just me, right? There's all these great people in the Football Association, and there's even people that I worked with that had that naturally. You probably find that easier. You've got to fight for it in other industries, but it's worth fighting for because it has the same effect. You find ideas you never would have thought of. And then no one in the Football Association is thinking, I think we'll build a carpooling out. This is going to shift the dial of football, but it does, right? And so that's really important, that collision of data and culture.
Oh, nice. I would imagine you've been in quite a lot of scenarios, good and bad, of course. What's been like one early career moment or mistake that still shapes how you transform or your transformation today?
I think the mistakes I reflect back on, is actually probably to hold on to your moments where I didn't hold on to my integrity enough. And I'm quite a strong person, so people think, is that true? I've stood up in front of people. I've ripped the RFP of the tender that I'm in front of them. So it's not worth the paper it's written on, and win the deal because you either think, well, I could probably find my way to winning this deal, and I'll find my way to the edges of. Sometimes you look at something and go, they're going to go the wrong direction, and the very least I could do is stand there and tell them that, right? And there are times when I haven't done that. I think when you're in that middle phase of your career, probably in my late 20s, where I probably felt financial pressure for the first time, because coming from a slightly financially poor background, to any money was like, oh, I'm raking it in. I'm earning more than my family. I'm doing well. But then you start adding houses and or think about other things. And late 20s, I started to back off a little bit and think, I don't want to rock the boat. I don't want to do this. And I had to refine myself in that process. So there were plenty of times where I regret that because I was probably doing things. It catches up with you eventually as well, right? I don't know about most people, but for me, if I'm not motivated to do it, it will catch up with me because I won't turn up in the way I need to turn up. I won't be doing the things I want to do. And so, there was probably quite a few of those in that phase that I look back and think, if you stood up for yourself back then and knew that that's okay, and knew that actually probably is what everybody needed from you, then it probably would have been much, much better outcomes. And they weren't complete failures, a lot of those things, but they weren't anywhere near what they could have been.
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah.
I like to say failures instead of failures. They're more like lessons.
Oh man, honestly, this whole fail fast thing, I get it when I've been in startups, I've been in my own startups, and there's a degree of that attitude, but it's for most people, we don't, we're not Jeff Bezos. Our parents give us 100 grand. There's a lot of these stories of failures. Great, I think is a bit misleading. I think most people, if you look back at those, Elon Musk does not come from poverty. His psychological safety around how he's going to feel is going to be very different to most entrepreneurs out there. But learn fast, 100%. And so, yeah, you probably need to take more risk in keeping that learn fast idea, because otherwise you're never going to be a challenger in the market. You're never going to redefine something. But then you move over to even corporate transformation. Think transformation's a big word, and it fails all the time because actually no one really ever tries to do it. They end up doing change, optimize what you do today. And they're just finding very expensive ways of optimizing what they do today. And so, yeah, 100%, that's got to be in. And then when you say learn fast, especially today, where we are, where you guys are with your product in the AI stuff that you're doing, you're finding ways to use what could be a high risk technology, but you're applying it to businesses, and you'll find that low risk, high value cases. That's a learning curve. There's got to be a learning curve. It's got to be a learning curve on both sides. It's a managed one. It's not all guns blazing, let's risk everything, but it's the way it's got to be, right?
Yeah, no, 100%. I think it's all about strategic risk and actually making sure you have insight what the plan actually looks like. But I think it's also kind of plays in part with our athletic mindset and the athlete mindset in terms of that learning fast, you maybe get pushed down, but it's all about climbing back again and continue pushing on for sure. But Rory, let's move on from the journey to the playbook you're running inside insurers. So in plain terms, what does customer core mean? How does it change your day-to-day work across distribution, services, and claims?
Yeah, I think that's really important. So, if your technology doesn't reflect your mission, your vision, you are going to run the risk of rebuilding the companies that you work with back to where they were. Again, that optimization rather than transformation. It's a transformative piece of software because it's fundamentally built around a customer core. Was one of a few reasons, but that's a very important reason. And the customer core is where all the customer data sits. It's operationalized. It's data fluid. You think about the AI world we're in now, how essential that's going to be, right? It means actually when you need that data fairly close to real time, you can operationalize that. Whether that's in AI or whether that's in a much more deterministic model, it doesn't really matter. You've got the data availability you need. Insurers today are normally built around a policy ID. All of our experiences you guys would have experiences with insurance, and you would know that, right? You're treated as a policy number. A risk, I can price. But you're not even a risk as a person, you're a risk as a policy. So I'm pricing you and your car now. And that's why most of them can't get to cross-selling. A lot of cross-selling is very hard to operationalize because you're building through these big policy structures, product structures. Now, I know you guys do a lot of work in financial services, but you're going to find less of it, but you're going to find lots of it as well. Like this product mindset, we're building ourselves vertically, and you think, well, actually, if I look at you horizontally, the opportunity grows massively. It's when underwriters perhaps come and challenge me a little bit on some of our assertions, and they should, by the way, they're all good challenges. But you start saying, well, imagine a world where we value a customer. We're going to start saying, okay, there's slightly more risk there, rather than reject them around that, because I'm getting their home insurance, because I'm seeing their travel, because I'm looking at them now as a customer. Maybe I value them differently. I'm not saying you would necessarily might not always be the right thing, but there are loads of cases where you would. And actually you start expanding your customer base. But also we change organizations doing that to relationship businesses where, of course, a lot more of your differentiation in the market is going to be how you form meaningful relationships. Insurance is a real challenge. It's the lowest trusted industry in the world. In the UK, it gets scored lower than estate agents. I mean, I've got nothing against estate agents, but banks in 2008 still remained more trusted. Now, 2008 was horrific, right? But they remained more trusted than insurers. Yet nothing can move without insurance. I do passionately believe in this industry. We make the world work. There are risks. There are things you would just never do without insurance. And we take it somewhat for granted because they've done a good job of making it a price consideration market for most consumers. And so we want to flip that on its head. And to do that, we had to build technology that fundamentally from the core changes how they operate.
Yeah, no, I definitely agree with you, Rory. Do you think there's, as an industry as a whole, there's potential to actually shift that sort of industry mindset and actually be more focused on the relationship-driven business?
It's coming. The economics of insurance are tough, Matt, because you ultimately you're still going to have to value your risk. We're not avoiding that. So if I say things like, well, we've got good examples of where you can start risk mitigating. So you say, well, actually, how about I know all about your risk and now I'm embedded in your life. Got this customer idea. I can look at your car differently. So maybe I go usage based, or so it's not about telematics, necessarily penalizing you, but it's perhaps these things would be incredibly straightforward, or are incredibly straightforward when you're built on the right technologies. And so that does start to help the economic challenge, which you have, which ultimately is you've got to value your risk, because insurers will still are valuing the market by their ratios, by how well they're going to perform. And that's still going to heavily influence them. So I'm not naive to that. But I do think also, and I have written a lot about this, the stock market needs to start giving insurers a different, ability to be valued. There's a lot of pressure on them to just be these kind of almost dividend generative stock. They're not growth stock. And yet, actually, as I described, if you take embedded insurance right now, a guy called Simon Torrance and EIS, we work together. We value the embedded insurance market, untapped, incremental market, around $3.7 trillion. That's an awful lot of value. Now, insurers struggle to get to it outside of sort of embedded finance style offerings. Interrupt you. Oh, you're buying some travel. Do you want some travel insurance? They're fine, but they're not going to change much about the industry. But it'd be very, very different if you had an active travel insurance policy that was embedded in your life and could activate in different ways. That would take it on further, what we call embedded 2.0, or insurance was embedded in your car. Always amazes me, right? Most cars have had a SIM card since 2008. We live in this connected world, and insurance is still this thing that's once a year, price considered. So there's a lot in the way, but there's a lot of economic reasoning that we can do if we think in the right way. So it's slowly coming. To answer that question about timing, I think it's a protracted tipping point, in my opinion, and that we're going through that now. Lots of reasons why I think technologies probably were slightly underprepared for the complexity and intensity of insurance, actually. But that excuse is gone. So I think that's what's now going to drive us over this point, really. You're in the AI space. And a friend of mine at HFS Research, David Cushman, tells me that we've gone through, like 30 years of change in 3 years when you look, or, it's a big number, right? Not probably that far off, in the way that it's going to change our lives. That'll take us on again, right? So, we'll get there.
Oh, Rory, we will be getting there with you in relations to AI and the business. Don't worry about that. But you work with dozens of carriers. Now, what are the first signals that an insurer is ready for real change, and the red flags that they're not?
We call this the ambitious insurer because we are a transformative piece of software. We're not a systems replacement. Early on, I wrote a strategy that basically said, that there's this ambitious insurer out there that recognizes all these growth opportunities around risk and some others. And they make up the best targets for us. The way you find them out, there's lots of ways, right? Some are being financially motivated, so they're going into capital models that maybe force them to have to properly transform. Some of them are just experiencing their own financial pressures, perhaps financially restructuring. Some have just got very, very good strategies that are very clear. The vision's very clear, good CEO, good leaderships that can really sort of want to push for change, and that there maybe is some signals in the market. I always say, they're probably weak signals, but in insurance, if there's any signal, it's usually a very, very good sign. Very cautious businesses, not very used to putting themselves out there in that way. So if there's any of those things going on, there's usually a good sign that there's an underlying ambition that we can then try and tap into and form there needs to be like a partnership, right? I think from what I know from you guys, you take a similar approach, right? It's going in, really understanding the problem. We're not selling tech. We're hopefully selling the business solution that you need ultimately. We're creating adaptivity is what we're really creating. So when you nub all this out, it's in the context of change that we really shift the dial for insurers. That's where they'll see I can build a product really quickly in sprints now. Yes, you can. You can now build a customer experience in under a sprint. If you're doing AI tools like you guys do, you can do these things really quickly. You've got to have the right foundations in place. You've got to have the right partnerships in place. And so, that's, I think, where we're going to increasingly see ambitions take us, is that insurers are willing to open up more and then have those kind of real conversations about what's going to change. There's a lot of insurers that still try and buy how they look today. And I'm slightly outspoken about this. I do think that is still a big problem. You just go to market and say, here's how I operate. How are you going to operate me? It's new tech in same business model. It's not transformation, right? So there might be some cost reasons to do that, but there's very little value upside reasons to act that way.
Oh, yeah, nice. And yeah, thanks for covering and answering that. Appreciate it. And the context to it was super helpful as well. I know in certain industries there's like myths about certain topics and so forth, but what's one myth about core transformation you wish the industry would retire?
I think there's still just a lack of understanding that it's mindset first in transformation. So, and everybody's mindset is what's in it for me. Love it if we just said, look, this is what the transformation outcome is going to look like for you. It's going to look like a better career. It's going to look like, give people that vision that they can understand. I mean, even the actual transformation pain as well. What is that going to do for me? Well, the learning that you're going to experience, but also the way you're going to be able to present yourself in the world, having understood how to do this. But a lot of people can't see their way to that. You've got to help them do it. And you've got to answer that question, what's in it for them? And go culture first, and really start talking about that stuff. I think also the myth is that because insurers underwrite risks, they feel like they're looking externally all the time. I do think there's a huge lack of true customer data, and I mean, for me, deep human insight, which is anthropological, which is really understanding how people live with insurance, how they perceive it and see it. I do think that's a myth still that people say we're customer first, and you look at them and go, this isn't true. There's no real true sense of that. It's a myth. So I think if those two things change, then we'll really start to see things move.
I guess hopefully in the next few years we might see those changes. Fingers crossed for sure. But Rory, I have to ask, so when a career transforms to get onto the platform, what actually changed in your first 90 to 180 days?
Then they move onto the platform. It's an interesting one because probably there's always this minimum viable framing, which I think is really healthy, but I think actually it varies a lot, right? So I think some of our insurers go for a true sort of minimum viable product they might launch first, and then they attack the market with it. Some might do what I call a minimum viable platform. So they take the full view, but they maybe cut things down so that and then they're working with change and taking control after that anyway, right? So they're not really doing everything in transformation. I often say there's 4 elements of transformation that you can kind of start with at the beginning of a project with us, which is the new working model that you're going to work in, right? Which is treat data as a perishable asset, constantly mind it for insight and act on it. Work in models that look akin to a software development business. The reason why I say that is because if I say agile, it's project management methodology. I don't mean that. I mean lots of cross-functional people getting together, working together to solve a problem, right? The tech's only going to move as fast as you. But you can do that straight away in the way you change. So start having that built in. That, I'm trying to remember my own four tenets now, but actually, those are the two actually more fundamental to driving the transformation change. The other two are more outcome driven, but I think you can bake those in early on. But then defining that minimum viable becomes almost like the first way of changing it, right? So, okay, you're acting like these multifunctional teams that are going to deliver things quickly. That's shifted the way your organizational model works. You're looking at data differently. You think constantly about how do I operationalize data? That's what a customer moment's going to be dependent on. It's what a employee moment's going to depend on. Is that data availability and that deep insight that you can drive from it. Now you can start saying, well, what is that minimum viable? And so the first 90, 100 days does vary, but I think if it's in that minimum viable frame, it works quite well. And I think the thing that all people should be trying to get out of those early stages once implementing the software is adaptivity. So the rate of change, you should be experiencing some of that early on, right? So it's how quickly you can start now changing things from that stage. Should feel like managed innovation. It should feel now like the insurers operating in a very different way.
Nice. So I want to ask, where does artificial intelligence make the biggest difference for insurers today?
We've got a big problem with pilot purgatory in insurance. As an industry, there's a bit of a problem, right? I think, you've seen all the MIT articles recently, and it's true. Pilot purgatory is ripe everywhere, but there's lots of foundational reasons why. I've seen some of these things about AI is dead. I'm like, AI is here to stay. AI's got a big role to play in the future. There's no doubt about that. Now, how we were going to, it was always going to be the challenge. There was always too much hype. We're always going to go through the hype phase. We're now in disillusionment, but our way back out is to get back to that value focus. AI can create human value. Go focus on it. It's always been the way. You've got to go back to that now. And I think in the insurance industry, though, the pilot failure with AI has been much more to do with the fact that they haven't really shifted the data model I mentioned to you earlier. They haven't really shifted the way they operated. So AI tends to be applied in a very small and very siloed way. And therefore, what you do is you get quite a high cost because you're adopting a new technology, because actually AI is not cheaper. I think AI in most use cases is more valuable, and you need to work on what is that value then, because otherwise you go back to minimize costs, maximize distribution. Banks, insurers always lean back to it. So recently I put out a video, sort of self-promotion, but I put out a video on LinkedIn just saying, you need to write positive business cases. That park AI is got some of the answers, right? But starting there is not the right idea, but write a positive business case, you'll find your way to AI, right? Because there's so much about how you want to use data, how much you want to intelligent orchestrate experiences. It's all going to take you that way, right? And that I think is the biggest problem in insurance. But where the most value will come from is probably in what I call the intelligent orchestration holistically around the customer. So just making it comes back to all the stuff we've been talking about for years, but personalizing the experience, helping people navigate insurance relationships, building those risk mitigation services I talked about. We can do all of this now in this new intelligence. Those are the big high value creating cases. There's loads in underwriting, but they're already doing a lot of that. That's because they can do that without data risks, usually, privacy concerns, that stuff. That's great. They're going to carry on. I wrote what was part of a research paper with Capgemini Research Institute on the underwriting trailblazer. And of course, they're heavy shifting data and generating insights. AI is very good because you've also got somebody in the human in the loop, and you've got a human in control. So you already have that kind of baked in. So they can explore AI in a different way. But on the front end of insurance, you're going to have to shift the data model. You're going to have to shift how you harness AI tools. We're an industry that I'd struggle to have a conversation about model context protocol or something like that in this industry, and being AI agnostic and maybe what that's going to take, or they're not there. When I wander into other industries, in conversations, there's still some problems, but they're a bit further ahead as well. So I think the value is going to be in the customer. The big value is going to be in shifting the way you manage and treat customers. The data stuff is starting to, at the moment, be where I've seen the most success for insurers applying AI, just in that analysis of data.
Yeah, no, 100%. I think when you just touched on it as well, especially it's always about being customer focused in this space. And I think especially in the AI space, a lot of people don't think, oh, we need to integrate AI. It's actually being able to assess what your actual problems are within your business. And I think it's having that awareness that there's so much different AI tools out there that can help mitigate those problems. But people just think, oh, we just need AI, we need AI. But that's not the case. It's actually understanding the root cause within the business and then see what can be done to essentially mitigate that.
So well articulated. Actually, you've hit the nail on the head, really. If you look at the process, if we're going to just take the way insurance works today, and we're not going to use AI as a chance to maybe reinvent those processes, because we didn't really digitize the industry either. So the problem with the insurance is it's not like you've got this sort of digital interface layer that you can just integrate with, and then that's where all the AI tools are going to come alive. Not that would work anyway, but you haven't even therefore got processes that really think about humans and machines fusing in that way, or even in fact making human moments happen better. There's a lot of distress moments in insurance claims, for example, where AI can be very, very good at saying, this customer's clearly got some problems. I can see loads of data points that a human would struggle to analyze. And I can tell you there's a moment here where maybe you should go and make contact with this customer. They're experiencing distress, or so naturally you've got the perverse effect of AI, which is it can humanize us more and it help us be more human in those moments. And that starts what you said, like, what is the process that you currently, and then maybe let's look at all the problems, but then let's actually put that to one side and then use this to think differently. I think you're absolutely right.
Yeah, no, 100%. And Rory, I know you just touched on it as well. I think a lot of time you speak about AI or solutions, you always kind of focus about the human or the customer. I know you've always said to be more AI and more digital, you need to be more human, and maybe very outspoken about that. So please unpack that for us.
Yeah, I think that was, early instincts where you operate my own business or did something new for the first time, where you really have no choice but to focus on the customer and how you can shift that paradigm. And then through opportunities in Cognizant in particular, where I helped incubate Digital Works. I worked for a guy called Lester Lamb and Jen, and these guys had sort of set this up, but really was given the job to drive it out. And we invested in Anthropology. I think at one point we had the largest body of professional anthropologists in the world, right? And we did some fascinating things. And that really, really reinforced. I'd always done user-centered design. I'd always been that way. I've always used deep human insight, but this took it to another level. You know, anthropologists going out there, they were just bringing insights that I'd never seen back about humans' work. I'll give you an example. Actually, we did a sort of almost a side project around diabetes, and it was for an American company. And they were saying, look, you know, there's these people who, if they don't take their insulin, they die, but they don't take their insulin. There's a cohort that just never do it. And then there's all these other people absolutely do it brilliantly. And we've built digital apps that alert them, and you've got to take your insulin, you're going to die, and all this great stuff, but it doesn't change them. So we sent some anthropologists out to go and look at this. And of course, there's a cohort of these people that don't have the right social circumstances to take a regular dose of insulin. They're maybe spending too much time in and out of homelessness and all sorts of things, right? So there's a cohort you got to tackle through social problems. So I say, first of all, giving them an app when they don't have a phone is probably not going to, they come into a medical center and your only answer is, I have an app for you. It's not going to work, right? They've got feature phones if they're lucky. So there's going to be, go and solve those problems differently. But there was a bunch where we'd learned that most people are habit formers. And there's a bunch of people that just are very dysregulated people. They're very dysregulated lives. You know, they might work night shift, all sorts of things. They're just very bad habit formers. And what we did is we built an app instead that trained habits. So it looked at these habit formers and said, you know, there's simple stuff, isn't there? Like have your insulin with your coffee in the morning. It might not be medically the right optimal moment, but you guys have got to part that because it's better than them not taking it. And then we train them around habit forming. And you get moments like that where you think, we may or may not have got there, right? You guys are super smart. You think, well, maybe we'd have got there. Maybe I'd have spoken to some customers. But anthropologists do it differently because they study the human and they really ingrain themselves in their lives. And that's when they unearth these mad habits and these people that just are so dysregulated that nothing's really, they're the guys with a pile of bills, and as soon as they walk into these houses, they'd see the dysregulation and think, these guys generally struggle, right? So we've got to help train them in a different way. And it worked. So, who knew that the best way of getting diabetics to take insulin is training them to habit form? So I've had lots of reinforcement over the years that absolutely it's the right way to go, right? So if you can form those deep human insights, I'm still convinced today there was a big, proper comprehensive study anthropological study on how people consume and understand insurance, that we would have a game-changing set of insight that the industry frankly doesn't have at the moment.
Nice. You throughout your journey, you must have seen quite a lot of use cases, right? If you had to prioritize just 2 AI use cases, maybe 3, for an essential carrier in the next 12 months, which would it be, and maybe why?
That's a tough one, isn't it? I would have to go in this industry with low risk, high value use cases. So I described before, and I would go for sort of use cases that have a human in the loop but still attack the customer. So attack the customer, still benefit the customer. As a customer first person, attack the customer, benefit the customer. So one of our clients did utilizing our data fluidity, but actually as a result of their own ingenuity, insurer in the UK do, and there's a public case study on it, use these Gen AI to generate call center scripts. It basically means it can take in all that data, and then when someone is calling, now, it's not scripting like the calls handler reads out the script. There's core scripts that they can operate around that are deterministic. But what the AI can do is provide other cues and prompts and say what that customer's experiencing and give them maybe other ideas. And if you take that really far, that could be incredible, right? And so you could say, well, it could be generating the logged in experience. It could be generating, there's all sorts of things. But yes, starting with that there though means you've got a human in the loop. You say you can speak to your call center staff. You can say, look, don't just read it. It's, the AI could be getting this wrong, but it's going to be giving you information you never had. It's that augmentation of human and so that's one. God, I've got to get to 2 or 3. And that's one on the customer side where I think you keep human in the API in control. I think in the middle of your business layer, there are process engineering improvements, that use cases that, you you guys, I think, do. I've got research on you guys, but there's some stuff you do around that, process optimization, but that sort of stuff, again, because you can also de-risk it. I don't know if you need to keep a human fully in the loop, but you certainly can have a human in control sufficiently that you can turn probabilistic technologies into deterministic. For us, AI is a broad term still. There's stuff where machine learning is absolutely the right way to do things at the moment still. And we've seen the differences between now understanding that if you load up all of your data into a prediction token engine, actually you're going to cause more hallucinations and more data failure. So there's things obviously we're sort of learning. It's still a new technology, right? But you can avoid that by looking at something like process engineering and going, well, yeah, but the human condition is already a fail point. You're relying on human ingenuity here too much. And actually relying on machine intelligence means that at least that's going to expose more insight and more data benefits and so on. So actually we can flip the risk model a bit, right? And say to your compliance officers or whoever, even your chief risk officer in some cases, they're in the room right now. They should be in the room more. Or we can flip that around a bit and say you're not doing it now. So with the AI, it's only going to make it better. Like, yes, it could still do the odd thing that we could query, but the fact that you perhaps aren't detecting vulnerable customers and you're obligated to under the FCA, or perhaps that you're only going to make this condition better. So let's look at the risk differently. I think those use cases are really good. And then a third one, I'm working my way down the stack. A third one would be, as I said, around data analysis and data tasks. What I would like to see more of, and I think that it could be quite high value, is building sort of Gen AI business model kind of prediction engines. So there's these world models that people often think that is about spatial or geospatial. Or don't need to go that far. For me, a world model could be like the world of data that you have. AI is probably in a good enough shape right now where you could say, what could take underwriting or, actuarial science, for example, deep data science, and just model that out a little bit in terms of what's the best way for customers to experience this, or challenge those kind of models quicker. I think there's some of it that goes on in flavors. People say, well, we do bits of it, but I think there's an opportunity probably to have an AI twin in that part of your business that really is, but it's also trained on the right data. So a lot of it's already happening. I would turn around to insurers and say, are you stopping your staff from doing it? Because I think a lot of them are probably just chucking the odd query in anyway, right? So actually, this is going to make it way, way better. You're going to be able to make, build knowledge. The AI done correctly can work like an adversarial network. It can start training itself a bit. So we can really optimize this. So that'd be my third kind of use case space that's not out there at the moment.
Yeah, Rory, I just got to say, I feel like you have given us a few bars of gold, and we're in 2008 where gold was most precious. So the information you have given us is very golden. So thank you. We appreciate that.
Oh, that's great. I'm glad I did that because you said 3 use cases. Because I'm a strategist, my brain goes wide, right? And then sometimes it's useful because that's when I worked a lot more in innovation. I used to love it because people like you would say, give me a view or just give me some flavor and I can take that to the other places, but you need to give me this down a level and it helps me a lot. So I'm grateful for it.
And I'm Rory, so I know operating as a global software business across US, Europe, Asia, and beyond, balancing local regulations and plumbing architecture. What's hard about scaling the platform in insurance and what gets easier at scale?
So I think you and I talked about this before. Right? I mean, I coined this phrase transcreation, right? So translating something is relatively easy. Go to Google Translate, you could probably get most of your copy on your website, or your same for software, right? You can kind of do that sort of market entry side has become incredibly easy. There are a lot of technologies built wrong that find that difficult, but that side of scaling out in my lifetime has changed completely. But the complexity in our markets, financial service insurance as a broader market, in particular with heavy regulation, heavy legal implications, you've got to transcreate to a market. And they don't all operate similarly right now. AI is a good example because in the States, they're taking a much different view to Europe. Resiliency acts, I'm not here to judge the political landscape in that way at all. I think there's pros and cons, right? And regulation's always got pros and cons, and it always overregulates, then underregulates, then overregulates. It always goes through what I call S curves with the economy. At the moment, I don't actually see the economy as a full industrial revolution or a revolution in that way. Actually, I think we're going through a moderate S curve, Ben, where we're in this gap between old technologies are starting to be phased out. People realize the new ones are coming in, but they're not quite sure yet. So and then we'll hit the next part of the S curve, right? So we'll get the growth that we need. I think the real transformation comes a bit later, when quantum kicks. We're going to go wrong here in this conversation. I don't want to take us there, but there are other things that are going to augment AI even, that are going to take that forward. So the world will change at that point. But my belief is that we enter the imagination economy, by the way. I think that if we get this right, we can use it. Our skills will become our imagination, and these tools will become the way we can project that imagination into the world. And we'll be trading our imagination as a skill, which I love, because it's probably 80% of what all I've got is my imagination. So bring it on. But, I think rather than training actually just in AI, training to have divergent thinking, work more divergently. We've had a bit of a backlash, haven't we, to divergency as a bigger concept again politically. So I think regulation and those markets need to change, and it's hard. So their first reaction to new technologies is almost to constrain them, right? And it doesn't matter how at the table they feel they are trying to control something that they probably don't understand. And that's always, that fear, uncertainty and doubt on their side is always going to lead to more restrictions. I think the focus is wrong. I think actually, in a way, regulating AI is probably wrong. I would regulate data use, human controls, and just go back to focusing on that. I think that will shift banks and insurers in particular quicker, and then they'll be more AI ready. They're not AI ready right now. They're going to do good AI things to value, and that's great. But the learning they're going to get from that is to look back at their business and realize they're trying to build AI skyscrapers on bungalow foundations. We're going to have to change some of these foundational things to get to that stuff, right? So, and the regulator is never going to let you, a regulator in the building market, to that analogy, wouldn't let you build a skyscraper on the same foundations as a single story building, right? So we're going to have to go through shifting, my window's not quite right in my house, or we'll move it with AI, and we'll move it quick and it'll look great, to actually, I want to take out this entire wall, and you go, well, you need to start laying down some of these. But the regulation's trying to stop us from moving the window. And that's not where it should be focused, right? So that transcreation, cyber-transcreation, coming back, is tough. And you need to work in markets. So what you need is huge amounts of adaptivity. If you're in core technologies like us, it needs to look like Lego, and you don't know what the instruction manual is. Because although you think it's insurance and you've got some of those things, the reality is the way in which they're going to want to configure and adapt is high. And actually, if you get that right, that's what they need to compete in the market better anyway. So they are tied to the competitive side, but it is hard. And my call out on that is, even within regulated companies that we work in, banking and insurance, we need to see these guys early on. They need to be in the room when we're talking about the value we're going to create. They need to be raising their concerns then, if they have any, and they need to work through those, because a lot of them aren't relevant, or a lot of them are related to something else. I've had some stuff recently where I think, well, that's not AI. That's because you're not cloud native, or that's not really AI because that's just how you operate. So your quickest way of getting around that is just to say, don't do the AI, but that seems silly because that's got value. So what might be better is we actually just change a bit of how you work, or we think about actually some of your other technologies and how they might work better. And then we get to the value, right? And regulation needs to be helping us with that rather than hindering us.
Yeah, no, I completely agree with Rory. And I definitely appreciate that analogy in terms of building skyscrapers on bungalow foundations. And I think that's kind of from the root within businesses as well. Many businesses, why they're not able to adopt it in the speed they want to. But now partnership muscles are system integration, data providers, AI tools. What makes a great partner in this ecosystem?
Well, a true partner has a very different mindset. And so sometimes when someone says, we have a partner, I immediately go into analyze mode, because a joint venture or maybe something determined on some KPIs, for example, usually isn't a great partnership, because really you're in a value chain. I think for me, the biggest thing that shifts a relationship is you move out of value chain thinking into true ecosystem thinking, which is, we all want to increase the knowledge of our customer and our ability to act on it together, right? And that does require us to move away from industrial KPIs. So we're all just driven to take the value and that's how we're forming our commercial partnership, and that's how we're going to form our relationship. We're always going to miss the biggest chunk of the value. And I think we all know the ecosystem drivers out there, there's only 9 of them, right? There's none in banking, there's none in insurance. Huge industries shift huge IT dollars. We're at $300 billion of IT spend in insurance every year, right? So huge shifts in dollars. that aren't changing much. And I think part of that is down to this. There's use cases of drivers say, yeah, I'm going to massively increase the knowledge of the customer and my ability to act on it. If you want to participate in my ecosystem, you can do the same. So if you want to use our ecosystem to shift more supply into that demand, then you do it. We'll give you all the tools to do it because it's going to improve ours. And then we've got to find business models like that. And there are business model shifts to true partnerships. So that'd be one thing I'd always try and look for. How can I move this from a value chain relationship into an ecosystem relationship? And I think the second thing I'm going to look for is that deep human trust. Where I think Josh might have been you, but that learning thing. Are we learning rapidly together? We don't need to be prepared to fail. That's not, if our business models are never going to allow us to do that, that's going to be the case. But we have to learn. We have to be able to learn fast together. And that in most partnerships, I would want to see a very, very high degree of sharing, insight sharing, knowledge, that true sense of working together. And that's often missing. So you can work on that and say, it's great, but you holding this back and I'm just sort of guessing. And then there's no partnership there. And I think the third one is to say, this is very easy to say, and I've done it very rarely, but maybe there is a bit more outcome driven modeling, certainly from big corporates to startups where they see venturing with their startup partners as a better way to generate value for both parties. Because, there's a lot of high value, and we're bad at this in the UK compared to the US, for example. So you see a lot more of this naturally. I'm betting on technology. I might as well bet on a partner, a young startup that's got, all of the energy, enthusiasm, and the right people, because I'm going to be in the game. And so actually I could put my $1 million over here, and I'm relying on the tech company really to decide how my business should operate. Got my money here, and then we go work that out together. And I think if more people thought about that venturing idea, or at least sharing some of the value, and if you sit on all of the customer value already, and you're just going to try and operationalize technology, you're always going to flatten their model, right? They're not going to be able to invest much in R&D. They're not going to help you pioneer in a way. So the third thing I would look for is better value distribution, or fairer, or whatever you want to, however you want to frame it.
No, that's nice. Glad I take. You've got some good analogies, Rory. What books you been reading to capture these? I need to know.
I think it's probably 49 years on the planet, in my 50th year. So that's probably where a lot of those analogies come from. Just
okay, you need to introduce me to your facial cream as well.
That probably was down to the sport, right? We were talking about this before, but I sort of did the wrong thing after I got injury. That thing in your 20s where you stay fit enough. If someone says, "Do you want to run a 10K?" You're like, "I'm fit enough. I'm busted ankle, but I'm still fit. I can run it, whatever." And you get away with an awful lot. But I always said to everybody, I'll be as fit in my 50s as I was in my 20s, playing at that level and just generally. And I've been on a journey back. So the past couple of years, I've been building it because I wanted to build it into my lifestyle. And actually, I thought I was fit, and I've been building it back in. And next year I turn 50, and I'm in the right place at the moment. So fingers crossed. But I got to lean up, and it's been a great journey for me because there's so much more data about how you can nutritionally do this stuff. One of you is a boxer, right? Or is it both of you?
That's
me.
There you go.
Not my bread and butter.
But that's a sport actually where if you want to stay, even to exercise with it. I always see people always ask me actually, if I'm with rugby players in particular, because I attend a lot of rugby events and speak at rugby and stuff. They'll say to me, what's the sport you think got the fittest spirit? I think it statistically is hands down boxers, right? But the amount of increase in insight and knowledge we have on how we can optimize our bodies and stuff like that has been great, because I don't think I've been able to get here without that. I've got a baggy shirt. I should have worn a tight, white t-shirt. So by next year, I'll be hopefully, and I think that's what's helped me out a little bit, because only recently people have started saying, you don't look your age, or I haven't had that much until recently. So it is this fitness journey that I think is helping me with that.
Yeah, no, fitness is important. It definitely, me and Damari, we said at the very beginning of this journey that fitness and business, they have a direct correlation. So we've got to stay in.
I'm going to do a shout out, and there's this great woman I met recently called Rose Hall. She was in the insurance industry doing innovation. She's doing all sorts of venturing and stuff at the moment. And she was a former D1 athlete and had troubles as well. But she wrote a great article. I'll send it to you guys. You can post it to your followers and stuff. But I think it was in MIT or one of the big publications on athletes and business and why they're successful, that sort of stuff. I feel, and I think, it's fitness. It's the fitness mindset, isn't it? It's not, you're not the fittest in the world, but you're on a journey. You're trying to be better. Translate it to business. You're on a journey. You're trying to get better. These things, of course, they're similar. And compete yourself. If you're not competing with somebody else, you at least should compete yourself. And I think it's really healthy just to have a view of what your best self might look like. And for a lot of people, that might be you're tackling mental health issues. And you should work on that, right? You shouldn't let other people distract you from that. It's essential to you. It's essential to whatever business you're working in. It's going to be essential to a better community. But that attitude is the same as what we found in sport, right?
Yeah, nice. And Rory, just before we do wrap up, and this is a question to you and for EIS, what's the milestone that you're most focused on right now?
I think for me, it will remain very customer centric. I do want to see the insurance industry shift, and so having that effect at scale is got to be a milestone. I don't think I'm there personally. I'm trying to get my voice out there more. Interestingly, although I'm media trained and I've done lots of stuff around this thing for a long time, it's only really been the past 2-3 years I've really put myself out there, and that's because I want to help insurers and talk to insurers in a different way. And I think for me, the milestone will be when that's it's not far off where it should be, but still need to increase that for myself. For EIS, it does need to continue its journey, right? I think, as you know, the software scale in this market, there are 9,500 insurers in the world. So, a good milestone would be when all of them are offering our technology. But probably realistically, there's probably about 1,400 odd that are, an ideal fit. And you've got to know your market. And market sizing is one of the things that I've specialized in over the years, of really focusing on where your customer value is going to be coming from. And so I think, big long-term milestone would be that you saturate that market, right? And but probably shorter term, there's a lot of great stuff on the horizon for this company. So converting a lot of what's in front of it, it's going to be essential. Yeah, that's a shorter term milestone.
We're going to stay in tune with what you're posting on social media and so forth. Speaking of social media, where could the people find you?
Well, actually, I'm quite noisy on LinkedIn. Most of my stuff I post is actually external publications. So I do a lot of press interviews. I've got recently published an FT. I've got another FT article coming out soon, but actually probably 2-3 times a week I'm published between kind of those kind of nationals and industry stuff. So I'm not just posting on LinkedIn like, yo, how's it going? Which is all great. Lots of people should do that. And, people criticize that and look at a lot of that stuff and get easy to filter, right? But nice to have community. So I'm not worried about that. But most of my stuff refers to some kind of thought leadership that I put out there, or maybe I've done a keynote or something. And a lot of people will video this stuff. You guys are probably videoing this, and I do a lot of podcasts. So I've got a lot. They tend to be quite seasonal in our industry, which is really interesting. And a lot of them are being recorded between now and kind of October, and then they saturate out into the new year. So there's a bit of a shortage at the moment from the beginning of the year where I did loads, but loads are coming out. So yeah, find me on LinkedIn, and then connect from there. I've got stuff on Substack for the first time, venturing into Substack very recently. So I post all my newsletter content and stuff on there. So if somebody prefers that channel, I've started to use that as well.
Perfect. I would say if you can send us that link, we're going to add it in the description so people can subscribe and follow that specific newsletter. But yeah, guys, that's been another episode of the Navvai Shift. Rory Yates, we got to say thank you. And Damari, thank you for being the co-host or having the co-host. But yeah, guys, we'll catch you on the next one. Thank you.
Thank you so much.